Hi, and welcome to Together, the podcast where we dive into the juicy terrain of conscious partnership and conscious parenting. Before we dive into today's episode, I just want to announce two things. So, our Together online community has officially launched. We've had 2 calls already. And if you are wanting a really low entry price point, space where you can deepen in love in your partnership, then the community, I think, is going to be the thing for you. So just scroll down to the show notes. There's going to be a link there. You can click on that. It's only $155 a month for both of you. And there's going to be 2 calls a month, bi-weekly calls that are 2 hours long. And then there's going to be a community chat that you can really get to know all the other people in the space. And then the other thing is just a quick shout out to our sponsor, Mindful Meds, who has a whole line of medicinal mushroom products. We're not going to go into all of them here. Go check them out, mindfulmeds.io. And because you're a valued listener, all you have to do is put in the promo code TOGETHER, and that's going to give you 15% off. Also, down in the show notes. So today's topic, we are going to be exploring the leaders of the new world, the new earth, parenting strong-willed children, strong-spirited children. Courtney, do you want to start by giving us some orientation of what a strong-willed child is?
Yeah, and the first thing, Mike and I are excited to talk about this because we're knee-deep in this in our daily life, because we have a 2.5-year-old little boy who is very potent, very strong-willed, very strong-spirited and alive, has a lot of clarity about what he wants and what he doesn't want, very expressive, big energy. He's a leader. He's already a really powerful leader. And it actually even says that in his gene keys in different ways when people look at it like, oh, this is a powerful leader. And it's interesting because Mike and I both have that quality as well. This strong leadership, strong-willed, potent energy. And for me, when I was a kid, there's a lot of stories of me being really clear about what I want and, standing up for myself, big boundaries. And this is I think a really important topic to dive into, because we're kind of having to unwind a lot of programming culturally and contextually that actually has made strong-willed children who are leaders bad, has labeled them as there's something wrong, diagnosed them with things, made it a problem. And so many of our structures in our society aren't actually set up for these highly alive beings who, you can just look at this from a developmental place, and we'll dive into that, the nervous system and developmental, but then you can also slide into the spiritual place, and we're going to dive into that too, of looking at where the earth is going, and something called Crystalline Children, which, if you subscribe to this belief, which resonates for us, we're now in a crystalline age. And so there's a new energy to what the children are showing up as. And this kind of strong-willed quality is a part of that. So we're excited to dive in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe start in some of the terrain that we want to explore today is, if you're listening and you don't have children, this can be the child inside that's still developing. And so we're going to explore both. We're going to explore the practical pieces of actually parenting this new generation of human, and developmentally what this all looks like. And any of the pieces that we're touching on that's about the external child, you can really take that information and apply it to the younger parts inside of you, or the qualities that you hear and notice about this external child. You can apply that to inside.
And the other thing too is that often at the root of some of these really sticky places in people's relationships is the place where the strong-willed child in us didn't have space, didn't get to develop. And then now we're in relationship and there's a safety, we're being met in new ways. And now guess what? That strongly willed child who's in there, they start to emerge. And now this is where conflict can happen. And there's a whole bunch of confusion around boundaries. And one person gets really rebellious in the relationship. And so understanding everything we're talking about with children then shows up in intimate partnership. And so just being curious, and for you out there with your children or with yourself, there will be a whole spectrum of where your child is on that strongly willed child. Some children just are more fiery and more potent, and some children aren't, but every child does have a will. Every child does have their own fire, their own needs. And, so there might be a spectrum to which you're parenting. Like our son would be very high on the strongly willed spectrum, Yeah.
And I'd love, with that piece there, I'd love to talk about what creates that.
Mm-hmm.
And so something that we learned from one of our mentors is that from 0 to 2 years old developmentally, the role and the responsibility of the parents is to almost attune to every little niggly need that they have when they're wanting reassurance, when they want milk, when they need to be held really close, when they need to be changed, like whatever it is that they're needing in those first 2 years, it's almost like fully meeting it. If you do that really well, then yay, you have now developed or created the environment to develop a really strong will. And then at 2 on, then it becomes how to guide that will in a way that keeps it safe.
Yeah, it's like the first stage developmentally is for the essence to land in the body, just to arrive. So this is where we talk about being. We just need to be with no expectations, not too much structure. This is where with little ones, like at first, we just want to attune to their needs. If they throw food, they throw food, like whatever they need, we want to meet their needs. We're just attuning and letting them land and be here. And like Mike said, then once we've done that, then their essence is here. They're here and they're in their body and they've landed. And then their next stage of learning is, wait a minute, who am I? Now that I'm here, who am I? And they can actually feel themselves because they've been attuned with. So when we're attuning with them, it mirrors to them their own sensations. Like, like you're holding a little baby and, you didn't like that. Or, you're needing a little more snuggle. Oh, you're hungry right now. Every time we do that accurately, it builds their inner neural pathways of, this is what it feels like when I'm angry. Oh, this is what it feels like when I'm hungry. Oh, this is what it feels like when I want closeness. So then what happens is now they've got this neural circuitry and their essence is here. And then now they want to learn how to run this body. They're like, I'm now going to explore who I am. And this is where they start to push into us. This is where they resist and they start exploring just saying no to everything because I want to see what it feels like to be a different person, and what happens if I do this and what happens if I fight. So, developmentally, this is the stage where they're really meant to resist. Their job is to resist. And it's important to name, though, in this, because this was surprising for me with Cedar, is I had been prepared that this usually happens around 3 or 4. And with him, it started at like 1.5, like 1.5. And I was like, what is happening? And then reaching out, what I learned is part of that is because culturally we haven't been great at attuning to little babies, and we have been misattuning, and the world's moving too fast, or we actually have too many expectations of babies. We've already shut them down by not really honoring their personhood. And so then what happens is that they, it takes them longer to land. It takes them longer to even find that sense of will if they do. Whereas if you do a really good job of attuning that and they've landed, that will can start to come in really early. So if that's happening for any of you out there, that was Cedar, like 1.5, like he was in that 3 or 4 year old experience. And that's when I started reaching out to just try to understand. But the thing to understand about this is the more that your child moves into that place of resistance, the more they're in resistance and they're, yay, that's all thumbs up. That means you're doing a really good job of creating safety because they feel safe enough to resist. And it also means that you're doing a really good job. You did a really good job helping them be here and their essence being attuned with. So it's so funny, right? Culturally, there would have been this idea like, what are you doing wrong as a parent that your child is resisting you so much? But really, when we look at neural development, when we look at the nervous system, that's actually a sign that you're doing really well. And that in itself is a big rewrite, I think, for a lot of people.
Well, I find that's the challenge point being parents is pushing against that cultural narrative that I feel when I look at my parents' generation. So much of what was implemented, not out of ill intent, but just ignorance about, this is all newer information where there's been studies of what's needed developmentally. In the previous culture, I think there was a lot of um, misattuning or thinking that it's healthy and appropriate to create space and distance in those first 2 years when a child is developing, putting babies in cribs. And, if you're listening and you've done that, no shame. Like this, I'm really just speaking to the place where this has been studied of what's needed for attachment. Putting babies in cribs and, the cry it out method of like locking them in rooms and just waiting till it stops, that shuts down the will.
Mhm.
And culturally, what I've heard a lot of narrative around, and I've watched this with actually like older women who commented on Cedar when he was younger. If he was quiet and still, they'd be like, what a good boy. He's
Mhm.
being so good.
Mhm.
And there's this actual belief that children are good if they're not expressing a lot of emotion, if they're not having um, temper tantrums, or they're not having these big explosions. That's actually can be seen as good.
Mhm.
And that's what we're challenging and needing to rewrite and break out of because, and this has been a aha moment for me being a parent of someone who's so strong-willed. Like our child is like Cedar's so in his body, so strong-willed, and I have to rewrite the narrative and I have to do my own personal development to regulate my own nervous system to understand that that actually is the health that's mirroring back to me the places where I maybe didn't get to express in that same way, where it
Mhm.
was shamed or shut down or seen as a problem.
Mhm.
So we really wanted to explore this topic because it's important to understand that those big waves of emotion, those strong wills, that is what is going to help this new way of humanity. These are the leaders of our new world, and we get to learn how to lead ourselves in relationship to it. So I just
Mhm.
wanted to touch that point because there are some children still in today's time that do experience lots of wanting those emotions to dampen. And we want to actually build collectively as a unit more information and understanding that, hey, if you're out in public, and we've experienced this many times, I've experienced this personally as a father. If I'm out in public, that's where I say I have the hardest time holding those big emotions sometimes because I can feel everyone else's, all the adult stuff and like glares and like my perception or imagining of judgments. And then what I'm needing is everyone else to be really regulated and be like, that's so healthy. And to help hold that space so that Cedar can just move through the energy and he will settle. Because the more regulated nervous systems are around our children, they will just find regulation. They don't know how to regulate in those earlier stages of development. So it's our role to hold it.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, you're saying so many good things there. And, the whole thing is that in the therapy world, in the somatic therapy world, in the developmental world, what we listen for is, I was such a good baby. Everyone talks about how I was such a good baby. I barely ever fussed. Um, or people will speak about this with their children. And in the therapy world, that's actually where we're the most concerned. Because in a healthy developing child, they'll feel many feelings throughout the day. And of course, there'll be some children that are more emotional than others, but there should be a whole range of what your child is expressing and asking for. And if your child isn't doing that, if they're not moving their body around and, trying to like push against a bit, or if they're not expressing their feelings, if they're just sitting, smiling, quiet all the time, that's another one. Oh, you just smiled all the time. That's actually a sign that your child is either dissociating or there's a lot of freeze online. And, that can be generational. It could be from their birth. It could be from, just stress in the home. Maybe you weren't able to tune with them really well. Maybe that's how you were as a baby. And then you didn't know how to meet them in that way because that's how you were as a baby. And then what happens is that then that's reinforced, right? Like, what a good baby, what a good kid, but inside, the thing to understand is they're uncomfortable. They're not in their life energy. They're not able to mobilize, and they're not really learning about emotions and who they are. And so, those kids can actually do really well in daycare and kindergarten and school, but they don't do well in terms of actually developing their own personhood. They don't necessarily do well, going out in the world and really establishing themselves in a big way. Often they have trouble doing that. Often they don't know how they feel. Often they're not able to really feel what other people are feeling because they weren't attuned with enough. So it's easy to have them around, but they're not alive. They're not shaping in the same way life. And, different children are going to have different journeys with this. But the thing to understand is if you have a child like that, it's beautiful to realize this, because then what your job just becomes is, oh, I'm noticing you're really quiet. And starting to get curious, what are they maybe feeling that they're not saying? How can you help them come out of freeze? And a lot of it is, what we call this in somatics is this is a dorsal heavy child. It's where they go more dorsal in their nervous system, like the shutdown, the break. Then your job is really to move towards when they're in that and bring them into life energy more. Not all the time, they need to rest and all that, but your job is to kind of move towards and draw them into life energy. Whereas what can happen is often those are the kids that are getting less attention because they're not in a big expression of something, or they're not, having a struggle. So we actually have to learn how to move towards those children more and draw them out and start to reflect back to them more about what might be happening for them. Oh, I noticed you're really still. Or I notice you've been like smiling all day and we had some upsetting things happen today and I'm wondering about that. It's like starting to mirror these things back, not because there's something wrong, but because there's actually an absence of facial expression emotions. And the thing to understand too is children who go to daycare really, really young, if they've had big experiences too fast, too soon, those are the children that are going to tend to have that more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's really important to name that, because those expressions you're talking about, or a lack of expression, like if they're smiling all the time, and that's the story of me as a baby, was that I was just happy all the time, happy baby, smiling all the time. And it's important to name that that's an adaptation. There's a coping strategy that happens is if the full range of experience and emotions isn't welcomed, or there is something that happens that's too soon developmentally, like putting a baby into a crib way too soon when they just haven't developed secure attachment, or if they've done the cry it out method, whatever it is, if there's something that's happened, they're going to learn, okay, showing these vulnerable waves of experience is too much. I need to survive. I'm going to adapt to do whatever I need to do to get some connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just important to name that piece
Mm-hmm.
of and rewrite the script. It's not that they're And it's check it out, like scan through your own exploration. Um, don't take this as the golden truth, like really explore it, check it out. But I love what you're saying there is like starting to reflect back and be curious,
Mhm.
like what is going on under there, slowing down, holding them, seeing if emotions do start to come online. Because that's what's going to give them the permission to start being in their life energy again.
Mhm.
Not just being like, oh, great. They aren't having big waves of emotion. They aren't having outbursts. This is so great. I have an easy child. That's why they start adapting,
Mhm.
is to actually create less stress for the parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing to understand that for a lot of little ones, where the miss is also happening that affects how much they're able to be in themselves is ideally we don't want a child to be concerned at all about how their experience impacts their parent. So we actually don't want a young child. At a certain point, we develop social awareness and that changes. But we don't actually want a young child to think about that at all. We don't want them to worry, well, what will mama feel about this? What will dad feel about this? Where we know we're doing a good job is that they don't care what happens for mom and dad. This is what they're feeling. And it's a really important developmental stage because it's where they really get the sense this is who I am and I'm worthy of love. This is who I am and my parents receive me in that and they meet me in that. It's like it's a very narcissistic time. They're not supposed to worry about that. So if you have a child that's, really worried about how you feel or, sometimes we can say things that are like, yeah, that's too much for mom, or, mom doesn't like it when you feel that way, or we can start saying things like this. And this can really start to bring in this idea that the child needs to stop being who they are. And these are subtle ways that we start to dim their essence. And really, so what I really want to emphasize is if your child is just feeling whatever they feel when they need to feel it, if they're pushing against you, resisting, that's a sign they feel safe. And that's a sign that they're getting to know themselves in a really deep way. And just to fast forward, imagine a child who gets that space to really get to know themselves without having to tune to anyone else. Imagine that amount of potency, capacity, self-awareness in an adult who's now actually integrated. That's going to be someone who's going to have a very strong capacity to love themselves, to know themselves, to trust their life energy, to know how they're different from other. And the interesting thing is, the more we're given space for that stage of development, the easier it is for us to then do the next stage of development, which is starting to be curious about what other people are feeling. But if we didn't get to actually get to know what we're feeling, if we didn't get the stage where we actually get to be whoever we are, however we want to be, then what will happen is when we move to the stage of getting to know other, we're very limited in what we can even take in about other because we don't know that about ourselves. And this is where intimate partnership becomes really tricky, is we're limited in how we're able to take in our partner or attune or know our partner because we're limited in how we know ourselves, And so when we're doing that early stage of development, that's what we're doing. And here's the part I think is important we dive into is a little bit of the how-to, because when I'm saying this, I'm not saying let a child do whatever they want, yes, for the first 2 years when they're baby. But then what you need to start doing is fully allowing their resistance, fully allowing their will, but you're still the banks. So, an example is we are getting in the car, we are going to our friends, we need to go. And the child's like, I don't want to. I don't want to put on my clothes. I don't want, the different, then it's letting them express that, letting that be here, acknowledging it. Yep, here's your feelings. I'm hearing you. Oh, yeah. We still have to go. We're still going. And I'm still being the banks and we're guiding that child into the car. And then we let them feel whatever they need to feel about that. They might be angry at us. They might cry. And so it's not that we're just doing what they want, but we're allowing all of their inner experience about that while being the banks, which, by the way, can be a lot. It's a lot to hold.
Yeah, it's a lot to hold just a name because it requires the capacity to regulate your own nervous system to hold that level of free expressing life energy. It can be a lot, and it requires tools, skills, understanding that it's healthy. I find to be able to guide it. And actually, our next podcast guest, Miriam Martineau, it, I'm sure will speak to this. She's the one who really gave me this analogy that's helped me. Is you want to imagine after two, it's like that child is just a rushing river. Like that life energy is just this rushing river. And as the parents, we're the logs in the river. And we just need to guide and figure out when to guide and bank that energy to channeled in the direction that's going to keep others safe, them safe, and get them to the next thing that just has to happen in the day to day life.
Mhm.
And so it's really building the tone to welcome their full expression and experience, not shaming or putting it down, not wanting to shut it down. If it's getting really big, just what do I need to do to regulate my own nervous system and be present with them so that they find and learn how to receive the regulation from your nervous system.
Yeah, and I want to say a little nuance with this piece because this was the most surprising part for me about parenting because I was all about gentle parenting. What I imagined I would do is it would be a lot of like soothing and just being grounded and this kind of thing. And then I started to notice that that didn't work for our little guy in lots of places. So if he was really pissed about something, really angry and losing it, it was almost like the more calm I was, the worse it would get. And it would just go on and on and on. So I had to start learning about, and then of course, as a somatic therapist, it's like, oh, right. It's not necessarily always, we need to always, it's the regulation, but regulation doesn't mean calm. So for example, if he's really angry, he actually sometimes needs me to meet him with equal amount of roar. Like he's like, rah, and he needs me to be like, rah, back, like a bigness, a big energy, not in a dysregulated way, ideally, in a regulated way, but he needs me to be fierce back or show him anger back. And what I find is that's actually what will soothe him. And I want to describe this a little bit because this is a little bit of the challenge to the gentle parenting is the way our brain works is if we're expressing an emotion and if it's a heightened emotion and everyone else around us is just calm, we can actually feel unseen. Like we actually like the world around us isn't mirroring us back. Like you're not getting this. You're just being all calm. Like this isn't calm. This isn't what you think the situation's calm. So the nervous system actually needs someone in the field to mirror back. And then it's like, okay, you got it. You heard me. You know, it's kind of like the idea, if my nervous system is convinced that something really awful happened, really big, and you just don't show any heightened or concern at all, I can feel unmet, like you're not getting it. But if you can really join me in it, like, oh yeah, what did happen? Oh my goodness. Oh, you know, if you think of when your child gets hurt, it's good to have a few moments of like, oh my goodness, are you okay? You know, like concern, because then you're mirroring back like, oh, we're feeling concerned together. And then now let's calm. And so that was a huge learning for me and has been the hardest part. Because for me, it's been easy to see that his resistance and his strong will is healthy, but it's been harder for me to embody the fierceness back. That's been hard for me. Like I could totally find the ground and just hold that like grounded. And then it was like, oh, that's not enough. I have to be fierce. And he actually wants to feel my energy equally or more fierce than him. And that's been hard for me. It's like, oh, the amount of tone that's taken because he wants to know, hey, I'm big and I've got these big feelings and I need to know that you're bigger, but without shutting me down. You know, and that's quite a thing to hold. Like, and often what that looks like, and I want to hear from you, Mike, is I have to kind of embody anger inside of me, but learn not to express it at him. It's like this anger energy that's like this like fire, so I can hold this fierceness and then not take it out on him. And I'm having to learn how to work with my own anger to be the strong enough. And I guess the idea would be, right, if it's a rushing river and you're just a tiny little like willow stick, right? you might be banking the water somewhat, but it's not going to feel as sturdy as like if you're like this big, huge fir tree or something, like that would be the analogy.
Yeah. Well, it can be infuriating for the nervous system to not be met. Like when
Yeah.
I think of all the work with my clients, like really what's happening is there's a deep, like I'm holding the role of attuning to what's happening for them so I can accurately and appropriately mirror the energy or the ingredients that didn't happen developmentally in a lot of the places in the deeper work. And our nervous systems need this. A funny example that's coming to mind for me as a man, and maybe this is true for other people, but as a man, I've heard this as a thing, is if I go to shake another man's hand and I'm going to shake with like some firm contact and then they're like limp handed, it's infuriating. It feels gross. Like there's an icky feeling to it, and vice versa. Like if we go in, if you go in for a hug or a handshake and then but somebody overpowers, that doesn't feel good either. There's a sweet spot in our nervous system where we really do desire to be mirrored and met where we're at, and this is the whole journey of learning how to attune to each other, the later stage of development. But for a toddler, what I've noticed is the right order is me as a father, us as, mother, father. It's our role to attune to him
Mhm.
and meet him with the life energy that he's expressing so that he can get the appropriate mirror of that's who I am. Because developmentally, who he is being downloaded by how we're all responding to him as his life energy's moving.
Yeah.
And I've found what's helpful in that place where, it's the ultimate initiation raising a little boy, being a man, and, him mirroring back all the places of my development. And it really palpably shows me how it shows me how I was met based off of my capacity to meet him where he's at. And so when it comes to, I'd say when you talked about what your most challenging part is, bringing the roar. Mine is feeling like being with his range of feelings. That's my challenge point. And also learning to rewire the healthy relationship to anger, that emotion that's so the boundary. It's just that, like when he's going through, I can see it when he's going through these huge hits of testosterone as he just, it's the highest levels he's ever going to have in his life are happening now and in teenage years. And that's a lot. I remember those hormone years. It's just like feeling like Superman, like they could do anything. And so to meet that, I've noticed requires, the words that I put here is not meeting him in the anger, but meeting him with authority. And so, like, I guess bringing anger is a place to push against, but not overpower.
Mhm.
And he needs that. And how we dance that is sometimes you'll look at me and he's in that big, like testosterone, life energy. And you're like, Mike, I really need you to wrestle him. And that's just what he needs. He needs a mirror back. And I can activate that easily. Aries man, I have a lot of raw. And so what I've noticed is so helpful for our little man is when he is in that, what that looks like is me being initiated through all the layers of collapse in me, thinking that it's too much or it's too intense or a problem. I actually have to initiate into my life energy and meet him, chase him around the house, wrestle him, throw him up in the air, swing around, do flips. And then eventually he hits the place of satiation and that life energy finds a place of integration. It's like, ah, I love you, Papa, and then he usually goes soft and then he shifts into a new energy, but he has to be met in it. And if he doesn't, it comes out in ways like whipping things at us or pushing against more. Like he needs that. He needs us to be the logs in the bank, is what I've noticed.
Yeah, and this has been I love how you're talking about that, and I'm so grateful. Like, it's really obvious when Mike's not around for a little while, like a week, he just went on a couple trips, and I was like, he needs his papa to wrestle him because I can't embody the same level of roar, right? The same level of fire. And one of the things too that has been such a challenge for us, and we really want to speak to this, is these strong-willed, potent children, they are going to throw things. They're going to hit. They're gonna, and I want to
Bite.
explain why. I want to explain why. It's because they're in their body and they're not yet socially developed. So they don't have the social awareness yet in their brain to be super aware of that. So it's not, when your child does that, it's not, oh my God, we've done something wrong. Oh my God, we have a child who's really mean or bad at all.
Or, oh my God, I'm such a bad parent is a
Yeah.
big one.
Yeah. Shame.
And I want to add a piece on to what you're sharing is just this really helped me is just the contemplation of how long it takes to develop a brain fully. 28 years for a man, 24, 20, ranging from like 22 to 24 years for a woman. It takes that long to fully develop a brain, just to take that in.
Hmm. So, part of what we've done culturally by not understanding that is we've expected little ones to be further along in their development than they are. And then when they start to do these behaviors, we make them bad. And historically, what's happened because of that is the children that are more alive, more fiery, more potent, they're the ones that get labeled as bad. They're the one whose name is on the board. They're the one who, these kinds of things, right? But the reframe is, literally, it means that that's how in their body they are and how much they're feeling. So they're like, "Oh, I have this feeling," and they do it with their body, and it's like, "Yay, good. That's so good that that impulse is online." And, at a certain point, you're going to be better able to be aware of what's appropriate. And in the meantime, we're going to keep redirecting of, okay, don't hit mama in the head, hit this pillow, okay, oh, not throwing that at papa, throw it at the, the basketball hoop. It's like not shaming it, but redirecting it, and mirroring back when like, ow, that hurt, that really hurt. When you feel that, like, say, I'm mad, let us know you're mad, and you can push into us. It's learning how to work with it without expecting them to be further along and without shaming yourself. Because I know for me, my most helpful mantra is, there's two things. One is his job is to resist me. His job is to feel whatever he's feeling in his body. And then the second one is, um, wow, imagine how much he can do in the world, how much he can impact because he's so here. And really seeing that as like, this is this little leader warrior who's developing. Like, for me with the Cedar, this might not be true of all of you, but he's definitely a little warrior. And so I'm just like, oh, I'm raising a little warrior, and thinking about it as that, what's the first step in warrior training, and right now he's at the part where he's just learning about this energy in his body, and we're just finding little ways for him to move it that won't hurt anybody.
Yeah. I actually, to highlight this piece, I just got back from London and was at an event with Richard Rudd, who's the guy who channeled the Gene Keys, which we talk about in a lot of our episodes. The topic of this event in London was about the future human. And something he spoke to was what the child, like somebody in the audience asked, like, okay, great. This is all these, these downloads of what's going to happen for the planet and what's going to happen, for humanity. But as parents and for the children, like, what does that look like? What are the ingredients that are needed? And something that really stood out for me, I'm like, yeah, that's like one of the biggest wisdom bombs, so simple, but makes so much sense. So he says, as parents, the ultimate aim is to recognize their essence and their gifts. You don't have to work or try hard at looking at their shadows. And the reason I'm using this is in the Gene Keys, there's all these keys, and there's the shadow, there's the gift, and there's the city, which is the essence. And so what he was really highlighting is, as parents, don't even really talk about the shadow. Don't talk about all the, the challenge parts, or not talk about, but not highlighting like, oh, they're this, they're that. It's like really flexing the muscle. And I know, God, I do have to work this one really hard, just through the nature of how I was raised. It's a really new rewrite to see what is the gifting expression, what's the essence behind this early underdeveloped or freshly developing phase of human. it's immature because it's developing. And so how can I, from my vantage point, see that what Cedar's expressing, what does that look like? What is that gonna look like? What is, one of Cedar's when he's in this thing where he's like, where I could, judge as he's controlling or he's this, he's like, he has a really strong aspiration. He knows what he wants and he is determined to get what he wants. Wow. What a gift to have when that continually is guided and banked in a healthy way. That will turn into such amazing qualities that will really lead others well, that will help him lead his own life well, lead him into the relationships that are going to be nourishing and healthy and reciprocal. Like it's us as parents, and I find it's the most rewarding when it can happen. And just that orientation I found is helpful is what is the gift in the expression that's coming out?
Mm-hmm.
Like, whoa, the anger. Wow, he's going to have really clear boundaries. And just to name how this actually looks, we've learned this about Cedar. He's so comfortable by being in his anger that if he starts to relate with somebody outside of our community that maybe is misattuning to him and comes in too fast, he will be like, no, he'll push back. He'll take space. He doesn't just shut down. He's like, I don't like that. Or he'll just go in the other direction, and this is why we want to really expand this conversation, really bring in these pieces, because the more we allow them to feel their full expression and keep them safe and others safe, they will develop into those qualities that those emotions are meant to be doing, and what gifting does come from them.
Yes. And as parents, the tricky part is deconditioning our mind because we live in a world that's so like this isn't healthy. Like there's so many expectations that we have to kind of unwind and decondition ourselves to just really notice what are the strengths of my child and to see it that way, to like keep seeing that. And it doesn't, and we need to guide it. We need to guide it. There has to be some, like we have to say no sometimes. But like, can we keep attuning to that? And, one of the things about the Crystalline Children, just to speak to this new energy, which, the Gene Keys is about this, it's this new human, is the thing with Crystalline Children, if they haven't been completely smushed, like if they're able to be here, they got established enough in themselves. The interesting thing about this, and this gives me so much hope, and I was totally a crystalline kid, just to back up. I was a crystalline kid. I was right at the beginning of the cusp, but because the context I was in, I wasn't being related with in that way, it created a lot of confusion. So crystalline energy was there, but then also like a lot of murkiness and not like it got kind of distorted is how I would say it. And this is what can happen to children. If they have a crystalline energy, they have this new earth energy, but we keep trying to overlay the old world way. It can distort their connection to that energy. But basically the crystalline energy, now children that are born have a crystalline energy system. And, this system it can move very quickly. It can move through things really fast. And it doesn't respond to the old world things. Like the joke is try to shame a crystalline kid, it actually just, for the most part, bounces off of them unless they've been really shut down when they were young. And, they're going to say what they feel. They're going to say, what's true for them. And I know I was like that as a kid. And my experience in this was when I was in school, when I was in all these places, I was the kid that would say, no, that doesn't feel right. Or no, I'm not okay with that. And boy, the waves that created in the world around me, like it was like, what's going on? But how I experienced it inside of myself was there was a part of me that knew this is what I'm supposed to do. This is how I'll be accepted. But then another part of my system was like, fuck no, I'm saying like, this doesn't feel good for me. I don't want to do that, and imagine a world where we have children who are able to say these things. They're able to embody their own gifts. They're able to follow their own life impulse, but not in an antisocial way, right? Because I think what can also come to mind for us is the rebel who's just like pushing against. And that can be the fear, like, well, I don't want my child to just always push against. There needs to be a connection. But the thing to understand developmentally is if we can fully embody the resistance and then we come into the development of our brain and our social, we're now going to be able to make more space for other. We're going to be able to attune to other. What makes it hard for us to properly attune to the needs of the whole or the needs of our partner or the needs of our children? It's when we didn't get enough space to attune to ourselves. What helps us attune properly to the greater needs of society, to the group, to the village, to our family? It's when we feel like we know ourselves enough and we've been met enough that we have to give, that we have to offer, you know? So this is the sequencing of what needs to happen in order for these crystalline kids who have strong energy fields, strong capacity for things to bounce off of them, strong capacity for adaptation, for them to actually come into the world and start to actually create our new world. And when I say this, I don't want to put that on them, because what I want to say is, for me, when I call Cedar a leader, I don't have an idea of what that means. Like, his leadership could be building an epic garden. You know what I mean? Like, his leadership could be like, I think it's really important we don't put on them, it means you're going to lead in this way, and more like the curiosity of like, whoa, what is he going to lead? You know? But I do see, whoa, what you are going to lead something, you know?
I think a healthy orientation there is just, as a parent, holding that they're going to lead themselves well.
Yeah.
And then however they want to express from that place could look so many different ways.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's an important one, is just holding that loosely. Because I think, there's a lot, and I've watched this culturally, we'll go to in the world, and, I've watched Cedar do well at something, and they're like, oh, he's going to be a musician. Oh, he's a drummer, or he's a this. And it's like, yeah, he's really enjoying that now and he's good at it. But we want to be really careful to hold that lightly and not, inundate with how that's going to, become one of their ways of leading. I think that's an important piece.
One of the words that I like, the other thing I wanted to say that I've been really working with, that I've been liking, is, the place, and Mike and I have done this a little bit, where the word might come in like, oh, he's controlling, or oh, he's bossy, like these words. I've been noticing that come in a little bit, and like, oh, no, I don't want that to be the language. I'm starting to say instead, oh, he's a good leader. And then what I'm starting to say to Cedar now and mirroring back to him is, because he'll start trying to lead me, right? Like, he's going to lead me. And then I'll say, and sometimes I let him, like when we're playing, like, yeah, like I'll do whatever you say, because that's what we're in the play. But then when it's not time, what I'm starting to say is, you're such a good leader. Right now isn't the time for you to lead, Mom. And saying it in that way versus, hey, don't boss me around. You're not in control. Because that's like the old way that can want to come out of my mouth, right? Like, stop bossing me around, And it's like, wait a minute. Oh, he's trying to lead. That's a really different word. Oh, he's trying to lead. Okay, this isn't the time for you to lead.
Yeah, some languaging that I'll use in that place is, I'll just mirror back to him just what's true. And I'll say, I'm big, you're small. And not in a way that's overpowering, but just in the place where he is maybe leading beyond what's appropriate to what's happening. Like, Cedar, you're small and I'm big. You get to be small and I'm big. I've got you. You're okay. And it's usually if he's having really big emotions and he's wanting to like do this and do that and do this, but he's so dysregulated, it's not actually like I have to be the one to attune to what he needs. That's when I'll use that. Like, I'm big, you're small, I got you. And it actually does settle him if I mirror it back. And the thing that I want to also put in the field is that, as the adult, as the parent, the more we do our work, the more our own stuff is going to come up. And it's our responsibility to work with that and to work through all of that so that we can offer over these ingredients of regulation so that these children, these leaders, can really come into their full expression. And if there's any places where you can't move through the thing, that's a place to go back to your support, whatever that looks like. It can be processing with a friend, it can be a therapist, a coach, some sort of just educating yourself about where your child is developmentally at that age, so that you can offer over that regulation. Because they're going to be, and Cedar is such a good mirror for me in this. It shows me my developmental limitations. If I go into the thing, like you named it, and I've done this for sure, I'm like, stop bossing me around. I'm like, oh man, there's a place where I'm collapsing or I feel shut down. And so I can't meet him where he's at. I need to then go process that with my support. And then when I do that, I'm like, oh, I feel held in that. That part of me grows up. And then I get to go back and meet him and be like, now I'm not going to react so much. Now I'm not going to do the thing where I'm shaming him or trying to overpower him. I think that's a really important piece to add. Like,
Yes.
if there's no benefit to sitting in the shame spiral of I'm a terrible parent if the dynamic isn't changing. That's a place to go get help to bring in the love and the compassion your nervous system, your little toddler or infant is needing, having that held so that it can integrate, grow up. And then you can bring that adult quality to the little one that you are actually parenting outside.
Yay, that's beautiful, Mike. And it makes me think of one other little piece here to speak to, because you're kind of so there's the version where parents could shut these kids down, right? Like shut them down, expect them to just like do everything we say. But the other version could be that they're such a strong leader. Boy, like I'll just let them do what they want, I can't control you, and or expecting them to take on more than they actually can be something, right? So, um, for example, if they seem so capable and competent and they're going to do this and you could just keep putting your hands up and like, great. But then we're not giving enough guidance. And so a way that these kids can get missed is they cannot get enough connection and guidance in their leading edge, because the parent, the adult, the teacher is like, I can't meet you. I don't know how to meet you there. It's too much. So I actually just collapse a bit and let you kind of just do your thing. And I know that was something that happened for me. And I think why I was such a strong-willed child is my parents did a beautiful job in lots of ways, because they had some understanding of this, of permission for me to be there with, so many nuances, so many layers of nuance. But there was a general like awareness that it's good for me to be allowed to be in the space and be myself. But they were completely at a loss of how to be the banks for that, how to meet me in that. My dad said, basically, when you were 3, we just realized that you could lead us better than we could lead you. And that statement is often what it'll feel like with strong-willed children. And our work is to receive that level of leadership from them, but not make them the leader. How do I become the leader as a parent that they need in that level of leadership that they're embodying? That's so much of the work.
Yeah, and a way to practically track this as a parent, I've found in my own experience anyways, is once the bids for connections slow down or stop from your child, they're moving into parentified child, where they're actually just starting to take that sense of responsibility that they're being handed. It's false empowerment. It's like, oh, my child is so capable, I'll just let them do all the things. But then they'll actually stop reaching as much. They'll stop the phrases and statements, which is so healthy, of look at me, look at me, look at this. You want to do this? Like, do this with me. I want to do that. Like, Cedar follows me around going like, want to go fishing with me? Like, let's wrestle. Let's do this. And for a parent, I'm going to be real, sometimes that can be exhausting, of like, oh my God, like I need to go to the bathroom. Like I need to eat some food. I have some needs here. And so it can feel exhausting. This is why we need to guide and bank. And there are places where there's the boundaries that are needed, necessary for them to learn from. And if those bids stop, that's the concern. That's the place to reorient and start to go into their world and engage with them more, to turn that back on.
Thank you for naming that. Yeah.
Beautiful. I
Mm.
would love to continually explore a whole new vein of this. This is such a passionate topic for us both, hey?
Yeah. And a big one because we're all as a culture learning how to bring ourselves back online,
Yeah.
our
So
essence.
if you're someone that's listening, again, like we had shared in the beginning, who doesn't have a child, what this can look like is the more you do your work, these parts that want to express and have emotions, it can feel like a lot sometimes. Like you may have some statements inside towards yourself of this is so intense, this is too much. This is life inviting you to really love those parts and build space for them to be here. They will shift and change. They will integrate. And if it feels like you can't do that and you go into the thing where you want to shut it down, go lean into the support, whoever resonates for that. If you're a couple, what this can look like is leaning into Courtney and I's online community where you can be around other couples that are sharing and processing these things that come up inside and as parents and all the things. And, going into community, going into circles, women's circles, men's circles, therapists. Just so you can really offer over those ingredients that maybe you didn't get. So if you're not in the role of parenting, then my imagining is you're in the journey of parenting self. And so all of these concepts we're talking about can apply internally too.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you are a parent, really just taking these and reflecting, what is happening for me? What is happening for my child? What am I comfortable with their full range? Or are they in the place where they're just always expressing neutrally or just always smiling? And maybe just, approaching a little differently and being curious,
Mm-hmm.
like what's needed there.
Yeah, knowing that they're going to have their own spectrum. So some children, they'll be more, it won't be so fiery, but they're still feeling their feelings. They're still having these moments of, maybe it's not such a wide range, but they're there, So it's really looking at that and really getting curious. What's my child's actual authentic way of expressing, and where are they maybe going into a freeze? Maybe they're shutting down. Maybe they're really worried about what we're feeling. And it's like a working practice, right? It's not something it's like an ongoing working practice.
Yeah. And we'd love to hear from you. I know this is a juicy topic. It can also be a triggering topic. And if you feel inspired, go down in the show notes. There's a section at the below where you can actually, post comments. We'd love to hear your comments on it. You can go onto either Courtney and I's social media. There's links in the show notes and you can DM us there. We'd love to hear, like, what does this bring up? What was your aha moment? Were there insights? Do you have other questions for us to expand on? We love to hear from you. This is what we're here for is, yes, we get to share what's moving through us here, but we're here to really be a part of this collective conversation, and we want you to be there and a part of it. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're so grateful to feel your presence and look forward to seeing you in the next one. We want to thank you all for tuning in and listening, and a quick shout out to our sponsor, Mindful Meds. Their product is something that we personally use, love, and appreciate so deeply. They have such a range of medicinal mushrooms. There's microdosing with psilocybin, different variations of it. There's a line called Social Spark that was a collaboration with Kid Carson out of Vancouver. And the one that's my favorite is Happy Days. No psilocybin in there, just a lot of really incredible mushrooms. Cordyceps, lion's mane, just really good for my nervous system. And so if you want to make an order because you are a listener, we want to give you a discount, 15% off. All you have to do is in the checkout, put in the promo code TOGETHER. It's going to give you 15% off. Enjoy. Until next time.